Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, cut off my knees and put it into my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
What you know, good and camp, you're listening to the And Campaign's Church Politics Podcast with Justin Giboney, a.k.a. Bishop Cooper's grandson. Now, y'all know that I usually try to start the podcast off with on a positive note, you know, joking around about sports, joking around about music or something like that, making fun of whoever is on the podcast with me at the time. Today, I want to be a little more serious because it's been a bad few weeks in a particular industry. It's been a bad couple weeks or a week or so in hip hop. I don't know if you heard, but a lot has gone down in hip hop in the last week. And I just kind of want to talk about that real quick. So one of the things that was really big news was that Eugene Big U Henley of LA was arrested on a RICO charge. Now, I'll be honest with you, I haven't gone through the full indictment, if the indictment's even out yet. But I believe that it's in part about extortion. Some people know that when celebrities go to LA, mostly, I guess, black celebrities who, you know, want to be around certain areas, you got to do what's called check-in. So you got to check in with certain people like Big U to, quote unquote, protect you. Well, some are saying that was actually an extortion operation where they were, you know, basically saying, pay us or you're going to get robbed. And it went on for, you know, decades as far as I can tell. Again, everybody's innocent until proven guilty, but there's some videos where it seems pretty clear that there is almost an admission there. And then also involves the murder of a young rapper. Then not just that, though, you had Yella Beezy, who is, Yella is from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And he was arrested for the murder of Mo 3. And I think Mo 3 was murdered, I want to say maybe 4 years ago. Can't remember exactly. But that Mo 3 is another Dallas-Fort Worth rapper. And I know I'm familiar with them. I have some friends from that area. You know, I've heard some of their songs. Just a really sad situation. And then also you had Atlanta rapper Young Scooter, who was killed. Initially, it was said that he was shot by Atlanta police, but it looks like, at least the police are saying, that he was running from the police and somehow kind of punctured his lung and ended up dying from that puncture wound. So really, you know, first, I just want to say prayers out to the families. I know most of these guys have children. The victims of some of these crimes have children. And it's just a really sad situation. I don't want us to lose, you know, this tends to happen so often that we can kind of become desensitized to it. I think that's a mistake. I think we need to really think about the impacts of stuff like this and why this is happening. It's not okay. It happens too often in hip hop. I don't know any other, you know, this is where the what about this and what about that comes in. I don't know any other genre that this happens as much as it does in hip hop. And so we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening and what responsibility do we have? Now, I'll be honest with you. I wish I could tell you that I just listen to Christian rap. I don't just listen to Christian rap. Like I said, I'm familiar with Yella Beezy, Mo 3, and I still probably listen to stuff that I struggle to say, should I be listening to this or not, right? I would like to come to you and say that I had it all together, but I don't. So as I talk about this, you know, I gotta kind of be talking to myself as well, okay? But we really need to think about, number one, the messages that that are coming out through this genre. We can say it doesn't matter, but it does matter. We can say that the lifestyles of the folks who are doing this don't matter, but the truth of the matter is, in some cases, the fans actually make this worse. I almost forgot. That's not even the only things that happened. We also have Sauce Walker, who is a Houston rapper who was in Memphis and got shot. He seems to be in stable condition, but the guy he was with, say so or something like that, actually was murdered in Memphis. So that's all within a week or two, and it's just unacceptable. Something's got to change. It's not okay. There's too many people being hurt, and there's too many kids being influenced by this culture. And I think, especially on social media, the fans and their interaction with these guys actually encourage this type of behavior, and it's becoming a very sad situation. And it's been that way for a while. And we can blame somebody else for it, or we can say, you know what, in some way we have to address this because it's not okay. And it's not, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's the news that it needs to be. When you have this many guys going to jail, getting killed, getting shot, all within a couple of weeks. I mean, people are talking about it a little bit, but it seems like it should be a bigger discussion. So just something to think about. But anyway, I want to give a shout out, as usual, to all our patrons and supporters for supporting us in what we do and how we do it. We want to be as honest as we can with you, as impartial as we can with you. We want to stay away from the idea that we shouldn't say the things that certain narratives tell us we can't say. We are not trying to further any narrative. We are trying to make sure that we are honest and that you're hearing what you need to hear, an honest analysis based on a biblical worldview. And so we could not do this without you. If you want more of this, I just wanted you to know that if you go to patreon.com/churchpolitics, then you will get another segment. So for instance, today I'll be recording a segment on the Signal chat debacle, right? The whole debacle with the U.S. military and some confidential information or not confidential information based on who you ask that was shared through a chat group. And I'll get into that today on the premium episode. So if you want to hear about that, want to hear my thoughts on it, make sure that you subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, we're still trying to get those YouTube numbers up. Make sure that you like and subscribe. I see y'all are creatures of habit. Our folks who listen to us, on iTunes and all that are not trying to switch over. And I get it. Wherever you feel comfortable, listen. But we are trying to get those numbers up. So if you get a chance, maybe even just forward that YouTube link to a friend. But anyway, y'all know what it is. Grab your Bible, get your mind right, and prepare to think, not like a Republican, not like a Democrat, but to think like a Christian. And in order to think like a Christian, as always, we got to go to Scripture. And today I want to go to Daniel 3, verse 16 through 18. Should be familiar to many of you, all right? And it says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. So we know there was kind of like a proclamation that everyone had to bow. And these three said, we're not going to do it. That is protest. That's an example of protest in the Bible. Now, the AND campaign is a movement rooted in a legacy of prayer, service, and protest. We believe protest against injustice and against immorality is essential to a faithful public witness. To observe unrighteousness from those with public authority and to say nothing is not Christ-like, is not faithful. And we're an organization also that believes no one, no group, no movement, no narrative, nor any method is above or below a fair and honest critique. So we value protest, but we also need to critique protest. And that tension kind of challenged me when I recently saw an analysis of protest on social media. Writer Vincent Bevins believes that protests don't work anymore. Not only don't they work, they often backfire. His overall conclusion seems to be that mass protest without revolution is a half measure, a waste of time and waste of social capital. Now, I want to be honest, he's coming from a global perspective. So he's not just talking about what's going on in the US. He specifically mentions Brazil. But I want to apply what he is saying to our context today. All right. So I don't want to do that by myself, though. All right. I want to bring in someone who's been on this show before, and someone who I value their opinion. Okay. So I want to bring in Dr. Jaha Howard. He is Atlanta Mays High School's own, Howard University's own, and just Atlanta's own in general, man. Good to see you, brother. How you feeling?
Hey, I'm feeling great. Thanks for having me on. I even got the T-shirt to prove it today.
Always representing. I can appreciate that. So it's good to have the audience kind of getting familiar with you as you've been coming on. Just got done with running for office, all those things that you got going on. Got your own practice, got the family, a lot of beautiful things going on, man. I want to talk about protest a little bit. Because I think there's something to what he's saying, right? If you look at a lot of the protests that have been going on recently in America, kind of in our areas, many of them have seemed to kind of backfire, right? Like, so if I think about Black Lives Matter and those protests, which I think the initial objective was good and I think it was necessary. I want to say that off top. But if I look back, can we say it almost backfired? Like, did it draw more people to it? Now, it may raise a lot of money, but in the end, did it draw more people to the cause or did it kind of repel people from the cause? That's kind of and this is only one instance. There's a lot of other instances, but as we look at this one instance, I wonder about that. But just generally, Jaha, what are your thoughts on protests today?
Yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation. Protest is important. It's part of who we are as Americans, and you can see the importance of the freedom of speech all over the world. And so I'm happy that we have this rich culture of protest throughout our nation's history. All of us probably have some specific issues that can drive us to actually want to go out, meet in a public square, and make our voice heard. Specifically with Black Lives Matter, I said during that time, I was like, I think Black Lives Matter did more to create more awareness of what was going on in months than what we saw in decades. And there's two things can't be true is happening again here. The response to the majority, potentially the majority of this country that thinks, hey, we're kind of doing too much. We're going too far with it. The backlash is real. We've seen this, and every time there's a social movement that gains steam, there is a backlash, and I think that there is some discussion that we have to have here. But I believe that it's necessary, Justin. I think it's necessary. There are some clear issues with kind of that people can point out anytime you have mass protest. It's the same. One of those issues is like how it's being done. I couldn't take my family out to downtown Atlanta and go out and protest in the streets. Not when folks are yelling "F the police" and all these other things that I would be guilty by association if I'm out there. It led me and some other parents out here form a group called Families Against Racism, and we did our own protest. But I would be lying if I said that Families Against Racism, putting together these amazing protests, would be possible without Black Lives Matter putting it on everybody's radar. So that's just an example, and I love it.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, there was definitely some work done there. And I think you make some really good points. Let me say this too, because as you know, the AND Campaign's book, Compassion and Conviction, talks about protest and advocacy. So let me give y'all a definition as we talk about this. Let me give you a definition of protest. All right. Protest is publicly registering disapproval of some action or set of circumstances for the purpose of moving those with power to act, right? So in this instance, it was people coming and saying, hey, this racialized violence has to stop. The police have to change and things of that nature. Now, to your point, there was one of the problems with Black Lives Matter, although I think there were some positive things there. One of the problems was the lack of clear leadership and hierarchy. Progressivism to a certain point right now is kind of like against hierarchy. Like everybody, the grassroots, everybody's in control, do your own thing. We don't need necessarily a hierarchy. Well, the problem with that is when you don't have clear leadership, people don't know what you actually stand for. So for the civil rights movement, it was very clear. We don't riot. We don't go out and tear stuff up. And so when somebody did, it couldn't be blamed on them because it was clear that they were trained not to do that. Not clear at all when it came to Black Lives Matter. I think one of the other issues was that movement quickly became about everything else in the progressive agenda. And that's kind of what happens to a lot of Black movements. It became about everything but what we were initially talking about. And so I say that to say the substance of the protest matters. The leadership, the issues, if the issues are changing from just being about this violence and stopping this violence and being protected from the police to all this other stuff that's laundered in from the elite left, which had nothing. I mean, most of the people in my community are like, bro, where did this even come from? I ain't said nothing about half the things you guys are talking about. Now you're talking about, tribes and villages instead of families and all this other stuff. We're like, what, bro? What are y'all talking about? So that was part of the problem. They laundered all this other stuff in, which tends to happen to a lot of racial issues because they are powerful, because people are made to pay attention. There are people that have money that try to put their issues on top of that. All right. And then I would also say you had, as far as substance goes, you had things like defund the police, prison abolition, which again, people who had some authority within the organization were talking about this. 70+% of Black people did not agree with that at all.
That's right.
Almost, 75, 80% did not agree with defunding the police. Reform, yes. And so that was the issue. You didn't really have clear representation because the issues went from what the like a critical mass of the Black population wanted to these elite progressive issues that people were like, bro, I've never said that. Where is this coming from? So I do think that hurt it. And let me also say this. I understand with the guy that made this statement, I think there's something to it because we do have to be innovative. So we can't protest in the same way that they did during civil rights, right? Like things have changed so much, but I think especially in the church sometimes, we're still so stuck on that era. We're not innovating from that era. There's a lot of lessons. I mean, I just wrote a book on that era and the principles, let's keep. Some of the tactics have to change. Methods. We have to understand that some of the dynamics and other issues that matter have changed. And I don't know that we've always made that adjustment yet.
Yeah, the author makes an excellent point that this horizontal kind of lack of leadership, it was a blessing and a curse, right? The blessing is it's not going to be what you've seen through Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. It is organic. It is, of course, use of social media platforms and all of that, able to just get people from across the board to just show up and show out in a major way. It worked, but it only works to a certain point. And what happened with Black Lives Matter and what has happened in almost every left-leaning push across the world, which the author is focusing on from 2010 to 2020, is that whatever the organized, well-funded groups are that are already in existence, they will co-opt that energy and it will turn into something else. Yeah. And that's exactly what has happened and what will continue to happen. So I'm firmly believe that protests need to happen, but as people of God, we are called to a high standard. Whether we're protesting or not, the question is, I guess a base question is, are we doing something are we in sin and how we're doing it? And I guess an even better question is God getting the glory in our methods? And
do we believe?
I think if we focus on that kind of lens, is God getting the glory throughout and having this law might change, but if not, right?
Right, exactly.
But if not, we're still going to serve the Lord mentality.
Because what I am seeing is a lot. One of the reasons I think it's backfiring is that a lot of our protests today is rooted in incivility, right? Like that's just part of what you do. It's uncivil. You got to be, coming at somebody's neck, calling somebody out of the name.
Yeah.
There's a hopelessness. There's a pride attached to it, and I think those things make it seem like it is counterproductive. I don't think it's always counterproductive. You have to have protests just in general as a concept. What it looks like and what the goals and objectives and norms within whatever organization or movement is pushing it, those things matter. And so I think we have to look a little deeper because I don't think it'll ever completely be outdated. Protests will always be needed. There'll always be authorities that aren't doing the right thing and they will need to be pushed back against. And you can look as far as, there's other protests that we can look at. You can look at when conservatives came against Target, when conservatives came against Budweiser. Things changed.
That's right.
Things changed, significantly. So there have been protests that have worked. There have been some that have been counterproductive, and we need to look a little more deeply into why.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think we covered this. Obviously, this is a great conversation, but as people of God, I think really honing in on the how.
It's a continuing conversation. And here's the thing, when you talk about protests, I think we can't only talk about like negative protests. We've got to talk about, okay, something bad is happening. How do we do something constructive despite that? Which is something that we're doing right now with the literacy project that we're building up right now. It's saying, there's some bad things going on. Not only am I going to resist, I'm going to do something productive in the midst of all this.
And that takes organization and leadership. You may not have the spontaneity, but if you have organization and leadership, leadership has just left us with the bad taste in our mouths across, and especially with race issues over the last few decades. And I think we have to be honest about that. What you saw with Black Lives Matter, a lot of it has to do with how leadership has, we have some critique, I think, serious critique on what has happened when it was centralized leadership. And you're no longer getting the voice of the people. So there has to be a way to do that. And I think as it was in the 50s and 60s, it takes Christians to be a moral compass to say, hey, let's do this in a way that Christ will be pleased.
Yeah, because when you talk about especially some of the activist movements that were productive, that were constructive, many times they were led by Christians. We'll be right back on the Church Politics Podcast.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
And we are back on the Church Politics Podcast. Like I said before, I'm with Atlanta's own Mays High School, Howard University, Dr. Jaha Howard. All right, guys. Now, Jaha, I want to talk about due process. There's been a lot of conversation about due process within the last week or so, and a lack of due process. All right, so let me give some background, some kind of legal background. I won't get too deep into the weeds on the legal side of it. I don't think y'all want all that, but I do want to make sure you have a basic understanding. Now, the United States Constitution's Due Process Clause provides that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. It's mentioned in the 5th and the 14th Amendment. In other words, what that means is that the government cannot throw you in jail or take adverse legal action against you without a fair judicial proceeding or without a proper application of the law. I can't just look at you and say, hey, you need to go to jail or I get to take your home without a process, a fair process that's applied just to me, just like it is to other people. Before that happens, you can't take that type of adverse action against me, okay? Brilliant. Right? This is part of why our Constitution is important. Now, one of the questions that comes up is whether or not due process extends not only to citizens, but to non-citizens. All right. And I've taken a look at some of the case law, looked at some of the work of legal scholars. And the case law seems to indicate, if you go to Wu versus Hopkins, you go to Wong Wing versus the United States, and so on, it seems to indicate that a significant degree of due process extends not only to citizens, but to non-citizens, and listen to this, even those who are here illegally. All right. So if you are here, you still have some level of due process to go through before you can get, before action can be taken against you. All right. Now, under that particular standard, it appears that the administration has violated not only the spirit, but the letter of the law and the letter of the due process clause in at least two cases, in two instances. And there's more than that. Maybe we'll touch on a few of them, but you may have heard that there was a Turkish doctoral student at Tufts University who had written an article basically voicing support for Palestinians in Israel's war in Gaza and was detained by U.S. immigration officials and threatened with deportation. Her arrest came a year after, again, that she had co-authored this opinion piece in the university's newspaper, criticizing the university's response to call students to divest from companies with ties to Israel and to acknowledge the Palestinian genocide. So that's what she wrote about. And she got arrested and now is threatened with deportation because she wrote an article. Now, you don't have to agree with the article, but she was in academia. And if you can, and somebody else said this, but I think it's right. I can't remember who it was. I would give them credit, but it was somebody I was scrolling and they had a video and they said this. If you can't have opinions that are a little bit different in college, whether they're bad, good, or anything else, I don't know where you can have them.
Yeah.
Isn't that supposed to be where there's an exchange of ideas? So not only is this happening on campuses where they say they're really trying to crack down on anti-Semitism, and so they're pushing all this stuff in, and I'll let you guys decide where you stand on that. I'm talking about due process. I'm talking about freedom of speech, and that goes for people I agree with and people I don't agree with. All right, guys? Here's the second instance. Now, President Trump has invoked the Alien Enemies Act for the first time since World War II to justify the deportation of hundreds of people under a presidential proclamation that was, talking about a gang invasion and this invading force of gangs. Okay, so a pretty extreme measure, but he's using that, right, the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, to not give due process to people considered gang members. All right. And here's the problem I have. Like in both instances, you're arrested. Like, it's one thing if the lady at Tufts University had been found to have tried to light the school on fire, tried to do something completely violent. You're telling me she wrote an article that you didn't like? And then on the second one, you're saying, well, how do you know they're gang members if there's no due process at all? How do you know any of these things? And so I'm going to hand it to you, Jaha. It seems like the message from this to me is from people who talk all the time about the Constitution and being patriots and all that stuff. But I think the message that we're sending is that if the people in power don't like a message enough, then they can avoid due process. They can ignore freedom of speech or whatever they want just to remove that threat. Not necessarily even a physical threat when we're talking about somebody who wrote an article, just a threat of having information out there that they don't like. And again, I would stand up for somebody who was even pushing commentary that I thought was somewhat racist. They have the right to say, they don't necessarily have to not go through due process and be jailed. I can't support that. That violates free speech, that violates due process. And it's interesting that we're doing all this only a few weeks after J.D. Vance just went to Europe and lectured everybody on freedom of speech. What are your thoughts?
That's the challenge here, is that we have an administration with supporters that have been part of an outcry for over a decade or so about the importance of freedom of speech, because in academia, the left has push the issue to almost to where you can't have a conversation, you can't disagree, and you've been fair to critique the left here. And then we have the right critiquing along the way, and then when it's politically expedient, now all of a sudden freedom of speech takes a back burner. Oh, because of this other principle of not even principle, this other ideology of immigration. So it's almost as if the administration and its supporters likes to they hold up the shiny object of the problem and then say, "Don't worry about how we're trying to solve the problem. Just focus on the idea that we're solving it.
Right.
Like, don't worry about it." And it baffles me because where are the principles? I'm not surprised. Obviously, our current president is not one that you would probably uh, connect with the concept of being a principled man. But his supporters and people of God who are listening, and are we holding our president accountable for not holding on to those same principles?
Right.
And we talked about this earlier. The methods do matter. We can't throw the methods out and say, well, it doesn't matter. As long as we're decreasing immigration, we're just not being honest about our conversation. And then what makes it extra baffling is that just weeks ago, we were talking about a fast track green card called a gold card. If you can pay $5 million because, oh, they'll be great for our economy. And there was just an article that just flew right underneath the radar. I think we raised $5 billion, our government, by selling 1,000 gold cards for $5 million a piece. Like, that just happened with all of this going on. So in one hand, you're saying, hey, immigrants, we're going to deport these so-called gang members, which I'm sure many of them were, but you're wrapping up these casualties of war, so to speak, these potentially innocent people getting sent to a prison that's at another country, right, in El Salvador, and these are Venezuelans. And then you have students who are being associated with protest because you don't like the substance of the protest. You're now packaging them all into this issue of immigration and say, don't worry about their freedoms here. We're trying to handle this. We're standing with Israel and we're focusing on immigration. So you're standing with Israel, holding up immigration, holding up the economy while doing all these other horrible things. And we have to call it out. If people of God don't call it out, who really will do it?
And here's one of the problems you see. Well, let me back up a little bit because the lady that was arrested from Tufts University had a visa, so she wasn't here illegally, right? She had a visa. So are we telling people that once you come to the United States, you can't say you don't have freedom of speech, you don't have due process, even if you got in legally? Shut up and just do what we tell you to do. Is that what we're saying? Essentially.
I mean, Marco Rubio just had a long interview saying, hey, these visas are a privilege. It's not a right. And I get it, the concept of it, but.
And if she was violent, then I would say, okay, that's a problem. You can't be coming over here cutting up like that. But if you have a disagreement with something that's going on, then say what you got to say. And I don't see a problem with writing an article on that. That doesn't make any sense to me. So she had a visa. Here's the other thing. There's an Iranian doctoral student in Alabama, at the University of Alabama, who was arrested by ICE, detained by ICE. They won't say what for. And his girlfriend's like, dude, he didn't write anything. He didn't do anything. Yeah. So we just grabbing up anybody who looks a certain way now? Now, we'll see. But guess what? You need to have due process to see if he did anything.
That's right. No, I think
right. So without due process, you don't know what due process isn't giving them something that they just don't deserve. It's to say, let's make sure what we think happened really happened so that we're a just country. Yeah. You still want to be just, whether they're here legally or illegally. To be just, there needs to be some sort of process, and nobody should lose that process. Now, is the process the exact way that it would be for a citizen? Maybe not, but it has to be a fair process to know what's going on. So that's just unfortunate to me. It's not upholding the values that I thought in America First, Love America, patriotic administration that they said they would be doing. But and here's the last thing. Let me say this. I almost forgot. The problem too is I don't know how much credibility the left has to even come against this.
Yeah.
Here's why. I thought, and even take what happened to Trump, I thought that they had a good case against Trump. Some of the DC cases were good. The case here in Georgia was good. We know what happened to that. I've said over and over again, the case in New York was trumped up and was wrong. And not enough people on the left called that out. You had a case where they went out of their way to make what was a misdemeanor, make it a felony. You had, and it just, and I think part of why he won is because of that. So here's the beauty of actually being impartial, that you get to call something out when the other side does it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can call it out, but everybody's like, well, y'all don't care, but you want to, when you're not, the majority in the court, you want to pack the court. When something happens in New York and it doesn't look right, you don't want to call it out because it might get the person that you want them to get. It can't be about that. It has to be about principles.
That's right.
And we see a lack of credibility right here because there's a lack of principles.
Yeah.
Anything else, ma'am?
Yeah, you made me, when you said that, it reminded me we have a federal judge who's, upset from what I can read that it looks like the administration is ignoring or defying orders. And now you have this potential constitutional crisis, which comes up quite often now.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point of credibility, to the average person listening to the news, they're going to say, oh, another federal something against Trump. And it's going to get washed into this sea of legalese.
Yep.
And even if he's completely wrong, we know that the left has kind of weaponized the law, right? And the right's weaponizing the law. So people are tuning out to really important things. So like the whole balance of power everything's in question right now. And so it can seem so overwhelming because we're getting new breaking news for major issues every other day that the average person is just like, I'm checked out. You know what? I'm about to just love Jesus. If he's ready to come on back tomorrow, I'm just going to make sure I'm right. And we have this kind of response. And I am concerned about that because it seems like it's an overwhelming, never ending.
And I'll say this. Don't disengage from politics in general. It's okay to disengage from every little case, every little thing that's happening on a national. I'm just telling you, keeping up with that is not really helping most people. I got to do it because it's my job, because I got to bring it to you. But most people are not helped by keeping up with every single little thing that comes out. I'm just going to be honest with you. You don't have to do that. Focus on local stuff. I'm not saying don't listen to anything, but maybe like once a week catch up or something like that. You don't have to be getting enraged and upset about that every day and sending out text every day about what's happening that's new. It's just not healthy.
Yeah. No, that's a good.
All right, we'll be right back on the Church Politics Podcast.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
We are back on the Church Politics Podcast. Now, something I mentioned in the last segment, or maybe it was Jaha that mentioned it, was migrants are being taken without due process, again, to El Salvador, to prisons in El Salvador. They're being kept in El Salvador. A court has said that process needs to stop. So there was like a court injunction, but yet some have still been going over there. And so that's a controversy that the court is going to have to, probably the Supreme Court is going to have to weigh in on. One of the things that happened was Kristi Noem, who is the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, went to visit El Salvador, and she recorded this video. And I want y'all to take a look at this video real quick.
Here at CCOT today and visiting this facility. And first of all, I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences for the violence that they have perpetuated in our communities. I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people.
All right. So that is your Secretary of Homeland Defense basically saying that if you come to our country illegally, this will be the consequence. And you see, for those of you who couldn't see it, actually, because I'm realizing not everybody's watching it on YouTube. Basically, she was standing in front of a jail cell, which it looks like, maybe 40, Hispanic men, heads shaved, were back there behind her. And my problem with that whole visual was, number one, is this really, first of all, let's realize those guys are there without due process. So if they have done something wrong, some of them may deserve to be jailed. I'm not saying that they should just be running around doing whatever they want. If they did not have any due process, you might have somebody in there that didn't do anything, that's in jail just because they look a certain way. But I can't say bigger, but my other issue with it is, why are we using them as an exhibit? I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, hey, I want you to see these guys in jail, so this will be you if you come here. I get that. But what about the image bearers standing behind you that are getting used in this way? Showing them off like caged animals just to prove your point. Is there any feeling that might be inappropriate? Especially given the circumstances and the context that brings them there. Anyone in this country who's not here legally, that's committing crimes, serious crimes, and that does happen, I have no problem with them being arrested. Given that there's no due process, given that you're showing it off in this way, as a Christian, whether you support the administration or not, does that not rub you the wrong way at all? Seeing them back there being used for this message, she could have given that message without those optics, which I think were insensitive and I think were just uncalled for. But go ahead, Jaha.
Yeah. I think we have to be extremely concerned anytime human beings are being portrayed like anything less than human beings, whether it's with rhetoric or whether it's with visuals. Oftentimes it is setting the stage for something really horrible to happen. Sometimes that means a genocide. Sometimes that means a mass deportation in a way that you are not going to be happy with, or maybe some people are happy with. And this gets back to a point earlier of, you can't hold up one principle while stomping on others along the way. We have to agree that we have a significant illegal immigration issue here in our country. Significant. But we can't keep pointing to the problem and saying, well, we need bold action, and bold action means dehumanizing folks through visuals, through our rhetoric. And we shouldn't be surprised, because the rhetoric has been there throughout the campaign, throughout the previous campaign from his first term. But again, this desensitizing of how we even describe other human beings is bothersome. And
it's a problem.
It is going to be up to Christians to be some type of moral voice, especially those that are supporters of the campaign. Someone has to push back.
Yeah, you would hope so. And here's the thing. So I posted that video on social media and I said, hey, they should be treated with dignity. And I had so many people, I'm guessing some of them were Christians, come and say, oh, you think people who have raped and murdered and robbed people here in the U.S. need to be treated with dignity? Yes. Everybody deserves to be treated with dignity. Does that mean if they committed those crimes, which we don't know that everybody in that photo or in that video committed those crimes because we didn't have due process, but if they committed those crimes, then they need to be punished for it.
That's right.
Punishment and treating people without dignity are two different things. And the sad thing is we have so many Christians that will run their mouths on social media or post on social media and don't even know the Christian concept of human dignity. Nothing strips you of human dignity. Nothing. So you can be arrested. You could have done really terrible things. There's still a certain level, a certain standard by which the government and other people need to treat you. And having somebody shown off as an exhibit, as a human exhibit, is wrong.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with not getting punished for what you did. And it's sad that we would talk and run our mouths and not know that basic Christian principle.
Yeah.
Anything else, Jaha?
That's an important lens, because all we tend to see out there is the counter argument being more of a left argument. The human rights is not through the lens of human dignity through like image of God. It's almost like let's ignore that there's an illegal immigration issue. Let's ignore that there are potentially a couple of hundred gang members in our country, and let's ignore that that's even a thing.
Right.
We throw it out as if it's not even a problem, and then until it is a problem, like on the left's doorstep, ask Chicago, ask New York, ask Atlanta. We have to be principled, but we are losing credibility so fast on both sides of the aisle. Again, people are checking out, and folks are just running amok because the everyday person is checking out. So again, Christians, please, you're not listening to this podcast for nothing. You're doing it because you're trying to tap in. And hopefully, I know I listen, and I'm an avid listener. So thank you, Justin, for helping us see things and looking at it through a Christian lens and not be hopeless, because we still serve a God who is under control, and he's not worried about tomorrow. He's not worried about next month and the next 4 years, because he's already there. And so we have to have that mindset. And so that helps me, and I just appreciate you for being a big part of that.
Nah, man, thank you for being a part of it and for all the support. And another point that you made was that's why I don't consider it both sidesism or false equivalence to mention a critique of two different groups in the same conversation, because it doesn't mean that they're equal. So in this immigration situation, I don't think that the Democrats and Republicans are equal. I think what the Republicans are doing right now is really bad. There's a better way to do it. Did Biden and them do a great job when it came to the border? No. But guess what? When I critique both of them, not saying that they're equal, it gives me a chance to convince the person who is persuadable that there's a better way to do this. But when I'm always jumping to one side and I can always critique one side, yeah, maybe you can't be accused of both sidesism, but you're also not going to convince the person that has seen you only talk about and critique one side.
That's right.
That's why we do it, because it's impartiality, which is also a biblical principle. All right, guys? That's what we're trying to get. We're not doing this to please both sides. We're doing this so we can be faithful and we can actually persuade people who are trying to listen and understand how this could be better.
Yeah.
All right? Well, always enjoy having you on, my brother. I am certain that you will be back. So thank you for your commentary. Thank you for your time, because I know you got a lot going on. All right.
It's all good. The Lord provides.
There you go. All right, Ann Camp, there's a cross that neither political conservatism nor progressivism is fit to bear. There's a civic hearing need of faithful witnesses who love social justice and won't surrender the truth to be loved by the world. Politic with the boldness and compassion of Jesus Christ. Until next time, Ann Camp, I'll holla at you.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.